Hello everyone. So the next topic which we will be going to study is about the osmosis. In this we will be discussing what is osmosis, what are the examples of osmosis, then how does osmosis play role in the plant cells. So all these we will be discussing in these presentation in these slides. So let's get started with the first slide of osmosis. That is the introduction. So what is osmosis? Osmosis is a process by which the molecules of a solvent they pass from a solution of low concentration to a solution of high concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. So this is known as osmosis. There is a diagram which is depicting the process of osmosis. So this is a semi-permeable membrane, and in this the process is being shown as the osmosis as the process in which the molecules of a solvent they pass through a solution at a low concentration to a high concentration, so through a semi-permeable membrane. So this diagrammatic representation is of the process of the osmosis, and here is a semi-permeable membrane which is depicting the whole process. Then what are the examples of osmosis? We will take the example of osmosis in the animal cell as well as in the plant cell. So when animal cells are exposed to hypertonic surroundings, hypertonic means there is a low water concentration. The water will leave the cell and causing the cell to shrink. So whenever there is a whenever there is a low concentration of water, the water will leave the cell and the cell will become shrink. So this condition is called as crenation. So this condition is known as crenation. And when the animal cells are placed in a hypertonic solution, which means there is a high water concentration, the water molecules will move into the cell and making it swell. So in this case, in the hypertonic, it will be the cells will shrink, and in the hypertonic surroundings, the cell will swell. So this is the case of osmosis in animal cells. So now what about the osmosis in the plant cells? When there is the absorption of water from the soil, it is due to osmosis. So whenever the soil absorbs the water, it is due to the osmosis. The guard cells of the plant cells are also affected by osmosis. So when the plant cells are filled with the water, the guard cell swells up and the stomata will open. So guard cells are present in the stomata. So whenever the plant cells are filled with water, the guard cells swell up and the stomata will open. So this was in case of plant cells. Now there are three kinds of osmotic solution which we will be discussing. The two we have already discussed, that is the hypertonic and the hypotonic. So what happens is there is an isotonic solution also which is present. So isotonic solution is when the same concentration of solutes both inside and the outside of the cell. When the concentration of water when the concentration of solute is same in both outside and in the inside of the cell, then this is known as isotonic solution. Then this is a diagram which is representing the isotonic solution when there's an equal concentration. Then we will discuss the hypertonic solution. It is one that has higher solute concentration. So when it will have higher solute concentration outside the cell than the inside. So what happens it will be the cells will shrink here. So whenever there is a high solute concentration, the outside the cell then the inside. So there is which means in the cell this part is in a high solute concentration. So the cells will have the low then the cell that is inside. So the cells will shrink in this case. And then what has the hypertonic solution, in which one that has higher solute concentration inside the cell than outside. So it will be just opposite. The hypertonic and the hypertonic is just the opposite. So the cells will, what happened to the cells? The cells will swell in this case. So this was about the types of osmotic solutions. Next we will be discussing what are the types of osmosis. So there are two types of osmosis which we will be discussing. First is endoosmosis and exoosmosis. So what is happening in endoosmosis? So whenever a cell is or substance is placed in a hypotonic solution, the solvent molecules inside the cell and the cell becomes turgid or undergoes deplasmolysis. This is known as endoosmosis. So this is endoosmosis when the substance is placed in a hypotonic solution. So the cells will become turgid and undergo deplasmolysis. And exoosmosis is when the substance is placed in the hypertonic solution, the solvent molecules they move outside the cell and the cell will become flaccid or undergo plasmolysis. So this is known as exoosmosis. So we have already discussed about the hypertonic and the hypotonic solutions. So now we have discussed the two types of osmosis, that is endoosmosis and exoosmosis. Next is, what is osmotic pressure? So osmotic pressure is the pressure that is required to stop water from diffusing through a membrane by osmosis. So here we are talking about semi-permeable membrane. So there is a formula which is depicting that how osmotic pressure can be calculated. So this is pi equals to ICRT. So what is this? Pi is the osmotic pressure. This is denoting the osmotic pressure. I is the Van Hoff factor. This is the Van Hoff factor. Then what is C? C is the molar concentration of the solute in the solution. Then we're talking about R is the universal gas constant and T is the temperature. So if someone tells you to find the osmotic pressure or to calculate the osmotic pressure, then this is the standard formula which can be used to find the osmotic pressure. Then osmosis and the plant cells. So we are focusing mainly on the plant cells. The capacity for water to move into the cell is different between plants and animals due to the presence of a cell wall. So what is the main difference between plant cells and animal cells is that the plant cells have the cell walls while the animals have only the cell membrane. They do not have the cell wall. So the capacity to move the water in the cell is also different here. Cell walls are rigid and they are only permeable to very small molecules. So the plant cells have a different criteria for osmosis, so because they have a cell wall. So as the water moves into the cell, the membrane is pushed up against the cell wall, creating hydrostatic or turgor pressure. So this is because water when moves into the cell, there will be a membrane which push up the water against the cell wall, and this creates a hydrostatic or turgor pressure. So the likelihood of water moving into the cells is referred to as a water potential, defined quantitatively as the pressure potential plus the solute potential. The pressure potential is dependent on the pressure inside the cell and the solute potential depends on the solute concentration in the cell. So the process here is essential for the mechanism because whereby the plants they get the water from the roots to the leaves even dozens of feet above the ground. So there is when there is a tree, they have a root and they have the leaves and the fruits very above the feet of above the ground level. So the plants get the water from the roots. This is the process by which the plants gets the water from the roots. So plants transport the sugars and other solutes to the roots in order to generate a gradient which is between inside and outside of the root. Water from the soil and then it moves into the root by the osmosis, which limits the rate and the amount of water that can enter the cell. So this was all about the osmosis, the types of osmosis, how osmosis plays role in the plant cells.